Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Healing Home. I'm your host, Michelle, and today I am very excited for many reasons, but the main reason is because of my guest who I'm having on today. I am going to be joined by Johnna Devereaux, who is a clinical pet nutritionist and herbalist, the owner of Fetch RI, which is a holistic pet boutique and supply store in Rhode Island. And she's also the chief nutrition officer over at Bow Wow Labs. Now, I found Johnna over on Instagram because she posts so many awesome things about holistic pet care, herbs, her journey with holistic pet care, and her personal experience working with her own pets and other people's pets in this realm. And so I am just honored to have her in the Healing Home today. And I just want to say before we get into it that for all things Healing Home, you can head to michelleshealinghome.com. And speaking of holistic pet care, you can download and purchase my handbook for herbal and natural cat care over there that I've written and put out for everybody, which is a wonderful introductory guide for people who are wanting to begin to introduce herbs or natural remedies to their cat's life. So, without further ado, help me in welcoming Johnna to the stream. Hello, Johnna.
Hello. Good. I'm doing well. I suddenly can't hear you.
Okay, we're back.
Now we're back.
Good thing we can edit. And excuse me that I mispronounced your name again. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Thank you for being here, and I'm so excited to have you. So if you want to introduce yourself for people who may not be familiar with your work, I'd love to give you the floor so you can do that and let us know how you got into holistic pet care in the first place.
Yeah, of course. So I'm really not good about talking about myself. I like to talk about the work that I do, though. So I am a clinical pet nutritionist, as you mentioned, and I have been in this space for over a decade now. I've been working with herbs for over too many decades to want to admit to, because then I'm aging myself. And I am a very young mycology student, about 3 years young. I've been exploring mushrooms, and I wish I had started that decades ago. I opened Fetch RI about 10 years ago because of my dog that I had rescued by the name of Diego. He really is the guiding light for me, and he was the being that changed the trajectory of my life in the best way possible. I was overworked and, wasn't really doing the things that I loved because you have to pay the bills and do the grind. And he was the gift from the universe to kind of come back and realign and recalibrate. And that happened by when I adopted him from the shelter that I was volunteering at. I actually met him when he was 3 days old, which really kind of created an amazing bond. So I got to see him 2 or 3 times a week until I was able to bring him home at 8 weeks. And just the most amazing human interspecies bond that I think I've ever seen personally, but he was also mine. And when I brought him home, he very quickly wasn't doing really well. He'd have like yeast infections in his ears. He'd have rashes and hives all over his body. And, he was my first single dog, right? I had had family animals my entire life, but he was like mine. And so I went out, and I was at the veterinarian every few weeks trying to get medication and advice, and we switched his food a million times. And it was about 6 months in that light bulb went off, and it was, geez, Johnna, you live with plants. You heal with plants. What the heck are you doing? Right? Like, why are you not going back to basics? And at that moment, the light bulb went off that the commercial, ultra processed diet is not what was going to make this animal thrive and have a life that's long and vital. And so at that moment, I started looking into books and just realizing how much can I learn and understand about nutrition, and how can I start using herbs for his body to help him along the way. And what I realized very quickly was that I knew nothing about canine nutrition. And I started the journey. It was 14 years ago about that. I started the journey of learning about the canine diet. And then that quickly progressed into felines. And then I went down the road of getting my clinical pet nutrition certification, which has been phenomenally amazing. And I never looked back at my former life, and I've never been happier.
Wow. I love that. Thank you for sharing it. And isn't it crazy too? I mean, a lot of times we get motivation from people, right? You see someone doing something and it motivates you, which is beautiful and awesome. But when it comes from a source like a pet, I feel like there's something more divine that happens almost
I
because
agree.
there's like an extra spiritual connection that goes on with the animals because they're connected in such a strong way to the universe and everything. So to hear that story and that Diego's been your motivation and your little, boost for the universe. And Diego's probably cheering you on, going, yes, do it, go, mom, go, you know?
Yeah. Did you ever hear that study that said that most people know what they want to do when they're 8 years old, and then
I
they
have.
so when I was 8 years old, I wanted to be a veterinarian, but I didn't want to deal with the blood or having to put an animal to sleep. And so Diego, I feel, was the universe's way of recalibrating me and making me understand that I could still work with animals and I didn't have to do it in the capacity of a veterinarian. And that's the gift that he bestowed on me, amongst millions of gifts that he bestowed on me, as being my little partner, my little canine partner.
Yeah. No, I love that because I feel the same way about our cat Carl, who he was the same thing for me. And as an herbalist, he was part of my herbal journey in the beginning. Like he motivated me to learn about herbs for cats from the beginning of my journey because I was always searching for things to make him feel better. And now that he's passed on, all of a sudden, like my calling for that and to put out content around this subject matter has just gone through the roof. And I can tell it's him cheering me on to just help other cats in the world in this capacity. And so kudos to you. That's awesome.
And thank you, Carl.
Yeah. Yes. Carl and Diego up there having fun
Absolutely.
together. So I want to ask too, the clinical holistic nutrition certification for animals, what does that look like? Because that's as soon as you say the certification process, it's something that rings bells within me to even look into for my own personal study and stuff. So what does that look like if somebody is interested in taking that journey, and what's the type of certification and learning process that goes through that?
Yeah. So when I started this journey a very long time ago, there was like only one or two schools that were doing it. And the clinical pet nutrition certification started out with, so it's a 500-hour program and then a clinical practical session where you have to go and work with 10 different pet parents and animals, right? Cats, you have to do 5 cats and 5 dogs and kind of go through the journey and work with the veterinarians. And so there's like the practical side outside of it. And so it's pretty intensive. Now, which I think it's so magnificent, you have so many, more so in the dog world than the cat world, but you have so many of these programs that veterinarians are now putting out their own little, educational universities that you can go on if you're interested as a pet parent. You may not be able to get the type of experience where you can go out and necessarily help other animals and other parents, but if you really just want to hone in on what can I do for my own pet, right? There's a lot of great courses out there. Or you could always I went to the the Academy of Natural Health Sciences, and like I said, that was a very long time ago. So there are a lot of new places that you can get similar educations. I'm outside of that, so I don't really know how to really grade the newer courses against what I did. But what I will tell you is that there's nothing like the hands-on experience. There's nothing like, getting that foundation. And then I've been blessed to have a lot of veterinarians work with me, send people my way because, hesitant at first because there are a lot of amazing veterinarians in this world, but they rightfully so are hesitant about people calling themselves, nutritionists that don't have a DVM at the end of their name, because there are some programs that aren't necessarily legitimate. I was lucky enough that the veterinarians that I kind of started working with, I just said, give me your worst, give me the one that you can't solve. Like, make me the last resort. And they were like, okay, we'll let the pet parents know. And if that's what they want to proceed, we'll have them contact you. And of course they do, because as pet parents, we love our pets and we don't ever want to hear those words, right? That they're sick, or we can't heal them, or we can't help them. Because healing is kind of something the body does on its own. We don't heal them. And so anyway, the results were pretty high on the scale, right? That out of maybe the first 10 vets that I worked with, maybe 9 out of the 10 all started to make really great progress, which the majority of the clients that I see, they're usually gastro related or skin related, right? So, yes, I do get the random, well, I mean, more so now, unfortunately, with dogs with cancer. That's unfortunately, and so there's a lot that we're doing with that as well. But the gut and the skin, which they are interconnected. But anyway, those are really the cases that came to me. And so, like I said, I've just been blessed to be able to help the animals, help the pet parents, and then gain that trust from the veterinarian community, that they know that they have another team member in their toolbox, so that at the end of the day, the journey and the goal is to do right by the animal and to give them the best quality of life, and to make them live as happy and as long as they are healthy, right? That's the big is keeping animals alive for us is not the goal. It's keeping themselves alive for them while they're as healthy as they can be and have a quality of life. And I've just been blessed to be able to be a part of that team for so many people.
Yes, you are speaking my language on so many levels. And that's another reason why I really wanted to have you on, because hearing you speak about this and holistic pet care is the way that I love to speak about and think about the same care for ourselves. And that's what I have found over the years too. And what I'll tell people is, if you're taking the steps to be healthy for you and to live long and live prosperous and live comfortably, you should do the same thing for your pet. And I think that, through programming, through media, through all sorts of avenues, we've kind of been taught from early ages that pets are pets and humans are humans, and that there's like some different thing going on. Do I still have you here? Because
Yeah.
you're frozen. I know that you also have had some success with your own cat. And it was leukemia, correct? That your cat was diagnosed with. And if you want to maybe go into that story, it's Henry, right?
Yeah, it's Henry, my
And
little
Henry,
ginger.
yeah, and Henry is very active on your social media as well, which is really cool. And so I would love if you could share that story, because it will be inspirational for a lot of other people out there to understand just the importance of plants and natural remedies and what can happen when we introduce them to our animals.
Of course, but I do want to digress for 1 second. You made a really important point about people taking care of themselves. One of the things we always want to think about is that our animals being nonverbal, right? They are energy beings. And so they absorb a lot of what we as humans, the stresses that we bring home when we're feeling sad, if we're feeling angry, if we're feeling overwhelmed, they absorb that. And so being able to feed our animals the best, cleanest diet possible helps them just to succeed as beings. So I just wanted to call that out. Now Henry is my little kitty. I say he's a kitty. He's 2 years old. Well, he's turning 2 next month. And that is really only because of my tenacity and my belief that I didn't want to give up on him. So we had him for about 6 months. He went and he was neutered. And the day after Christmas, so it was December 26th of 2022, I went to feed him and he just wasn't really looking like himself. And the problem is, so he was highly anemic. And with cats, when anemia happens slowly over time, their body adjusts and adapts. So it's not like a noticeable, like they're running today and then tomorrow they're just flat on the floor. Like it doesn't work like that. They just slowly kind of move a little bit slower. Now, it was also dead of winter, and where I live, it was like 18 degrees. So that's another reason why a cat isn't going to be as active, right? Because that's kind of just instinctual. So I didn't really think anything of it. And that morning I had woken up and I was like, something just, you get that internal something, right? And I lifted up his flu, the lip basically, and I saw how pale his gums were, and I was like, oh no. And of course, the day after Christmas, the only places that are open are emergency veterinarians, which was fine. And I was able to get him in, and they did blood work. And the orders were that we need to get him a blood transfusion, like right now. Like, we don't know how much longer this cat has, which was alarming to me, because here's my cat that's been eating, maybe a little bit less, but I'm not stupid, right? Like, I mean, it wasn't any alarming thing until that morning. And so I said, no, go do whatever you need. So they started a blood transfusion, and unfortunately his body rejected it. So we only got a little bit in, and he spiked a fever, a very dangerous fever. And he stayed there for observation for 2 days, trying to do tests, trying to figure out what was going on, because 2 months earlier, when he had gotten neutered, they had run all the tests and he had tested negative for everything. So they couldn't understand what was going on. And at the second day, they ended up running another test for leukemia and found that he was positive. And the specialist called me and said, I don't have good news. And I had just lost my boy, Diego, about a year prior. And that was important because Henry was my dog Lola, like her little buddy. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. It's all good.
It just, you can feel it. And I didn't want for Lola to have to go through that loss again. And so, I mean, I love Henry, but I had lost my soul dog, right? Like Henry was more for Lola. And so I basically said, okay, what do I do? And they said, well, he is really, really sick, and he doesn't care that he's really, really sick. So our recommendation is that you normally would be to put him to sleep, but you might have a week or two left, because this cat doesn't care that he's as sick as he is. So if you want to take him home, you could do that. We would be okay with that, just understanding that his time on this planet is short. So I said, absolutely. So I went and I picked him up, and the entire time picking him up, I'm crying hysterically, right? And I'm calling my husband, and he's like, calm down. I'm like, I can't calm down. I calmed down when I picked him up because I didn't want him feeling my energy. And I took him home, and I basically said to myself, Janna, you're not giving up. This is not the end of his story. And so, my mom hat had been on, and I had to take my mom hat off and put my clinician hat on, because they are separate. You know what I'm saying? They are. Oh, and yeah. I sat down, and I had already been feeding him raw food, because I know that's the way that his body was designed to eat. So because cell count was so his neutrophils were really low, I actually was doing, I decided to do a light cook, just to make certain that, I wasn't introducing something that would end up being fatal in his body. But then I started looking, and I, started looking at reishi, and I started looking at maitake, and I started looking at cordyceps, and I started looking about how all of these mushrooms can have been shown to induce apoptosis, which is a natural cell death, rather than necrosis, which is a cell death. So apoptosis is like a programmed cell death, so it's more natural. It doesn't create the same inflammation in the body and whatnot. I saw a study on cordyceps that showed that it actually was able to help with cancer cells and inhibit the liver hepato cells, right? And so I was like, okay, so if we can do this, and we know that mushrooms have anti-cancer properties, as well as, a good for the immune system, as well as, being rich in ergothioneine, which is great for antioxidants and all of the blessings that mushrooms give us. I said, let me put together those three, because I knew specifically those were the three I wanted. And then I started thinking about, let's look at his thymus gland. Let's see how we can supplement the thymus gland, because the idea of like heals like. So I found a thymus gland, and I ordered that immediately. And then I started thinking about the hemoglobin and the anemia, and I immediately went to spirulina. Spirulina can help increase the hemoglobin content in red blood cells. It boosts white blood cell production. So I just kind of put all of that together, and I started him on that like immediately. Like I overnighted I spent more money on overnight fees than, because it was coming within 24 hours, because I had a very short window. And you all know how this turns out, because he's here. Within about 4 days, his blood levels started shifting in an upward trend. And because I was getting his blood checked every 3 days at this point now. And the veterinarians were like, I don't know what you're doing or how this is working, but just don't stop. And I'm like, okay. So we continued that routine. In March, one of the internists said, why don't we just test and see how he's doing? And leukemia. And I said, all right, because he was still young enough that they thought it might actually clear out his immune system might actually be able to handle it and get rid of it. So I said, okay. So we did the leukemia test, and it came back negative. And I, at that moment, had my mom hat on, and I was jumping up for joy. And I remember coming home, and my husband's like, well, what does that mean? And I'm like, it means he's a healthy, normal cat, and we don't have to do this anymore. And I stopped the supplements. Dumbest thing I ever did. The clinician hat was off. 3 weeks later, he started to crash again. And I brought him back to the vet, and we ran the test. And of course, all of his levels started going back down, and he tested positive for leukemia. So what had happened was we had received a false negative test 3 weeks prior. The good news is that I started that regimen immediately back up, and his body responded. So, to all of those people, if it hadn't happened a second time, they might have said, but how do we know it was that and it wasn't this? Right? Everyone is going to come up with an excuse as to why, not everyone, but a lot of people try to downgrade what plant medicine and what fungal medicine can do and what diet can do for the body. And here I have a perfect example of a cat that once, but this protocol pulled him out twice. And that is how, I wish I hadn't have done it twice, right? I wish I had been smarter and never taken him off anything. But here we are a year later, and he is doing fantastic. And I don't care if I get 50 more negative tests for leukemia. I haven't tested him again, but even if I do, I'm never taking him off this protocol. Like, it's just not worth it. He looks forward to it's become part of his routine. And so, I tell people, when you get the bad news, it may be bad, right? Like, I don't think Henry will die of leukemia. And I'm not saying that cold-hearted. It's just, it is a fact. That will be what ends up killing him. But what my job is as his mom, certain that he has the happiest, most vital life, and that he, enjoys every second of it, and that I help him make it the longest life possible.
Oh man, you're getting me in the feels. That's such a beautiful story.
Yeah.
And the beauty of consistency and how that plays out in our lives in everything. So we know how important it is, if you want to be healthy and remain in shape, how important it is to always exercise, not just exercise for 4 months to lose weight for an event, or go on a crash diet because you want to lose 20 pounds to fit in whatever it is, all the vanity reasons that we try and jump into stuff really quickly, and this in and of itself is just such a beautiful testament to why herbs and fungi are the perfect thing to be incorporating into your daily life for you and your pets, because too, they're gentle. And, we all, obviously, and as you have so much experience as an herbalist, we know that certain plants have different constituents. We have to be careful with that. Some need to be cycled on and off, what have you. But there's so many out there that can be taken and given on a daily basis for your entire life without any adverse side effects, which to me is one of the other main reasons why it's so important to just talk more about these things, to dispel the fear that people have against things that aren't maybe approved by the FDA or approved by your veterinarian entirely. I think more people are getting on board with this and starting to question things a little bit more. And so if you maybe know the answer to this, but if you would have gone more of an allopathic route with Henry, do you know what they would have done besides maybe putting him down? Would it have been like chemo or radiation, or what would they have done, if anything?
Nothing. He was so
Okay.
sick. And here's the reason. The blood transfusion was critical.
Okay.
And because his body rejected the blood transfusion the first time, it was never going to accept a second blood transfusion. If his body had accepted the blood transfusion the first time, there would have been a different path forward potentially. And it would have been, but I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
So for us, it wasn't an option. And you just said something that's really important. So many people, and this applies to us as humans as well as for our pets, I feel like we either do so much research or are so averse to something different that we stay away from it, or we're too accepting of strangers' advice that we just say, oh, I should be taking ashwagandha, and just go buy it, right? Like, I think there needs to be a better balance. That, I'm a big fan of singulars. I don't like blends. I'd rather custom a blend for the individual in front of me, but there are a lot of blends on the market. And so that kind of scares me a little bit, because I know firsthand, like with ashwagandha, you don't want to be on that for long-term without cycling through that. And a lot of people don't know that. And it's in a lot of these custom pet products now. And it's in a lot of these, human blends as well. And so, it's the idea of understand that, especially with animals, right? So zoopharmacognosy is the study of animals using plants as medicine. Like the majority of our medicine comes from plants, from the rainforest. So if you understand that, it makes it easier to bridge that gap, that plant medicine isn't so scary, right? And so what's great now is that the scientific world is actually starting to explore more how to use, for instance, I found a study the other day which just blew my mind. So there are a lot of humans, sorry to talk about humans and not pets, but it's a human study. So many humans have allergic rhinitis, and they use loratadine as a way to heal for that, and solve for that symptom. And there was a recent study done that actually was testing ginger root, the rhizome of ginger, against loratadine, and the gingerol and the shigals in the ginger actually showed to be as beneficial at preventing the allergic rhinitis than the loratadine. So what are we doing? We're using a plant medicine that is supporting the body. It's not providing toxins. It's not providing anything that's going to stimulate an immune response in a negative way, versus a chemical, a synthetic drug. Like, there's just so many ways to help that journey of being healthy, right? And just kind of looking for alternatives. And I'm not saying that there's never a place for allopathic medicine and there's never a place for pharmaceuticals. Of course there is. But there's also, you need to have that space open to realize there's also a place for herbal medicine and for fungi in the life, as well as diet. Like, let's not forget the foundation, which is the food that you put in your body, is the basis for everything. You will either build a house that is strong and will stay there in the deepest, darkest of storms, or you will build a house that will fall apart at the slightest breeze. That's the difference that food is going to make.
Amen to that. And this is perfect, because I want to segue into this section of diet because in my experience as well, that was the most important thing that I've come across with cats and myself included. uh, Having a good diet, having things that are thoughtfully sourced. There's a lot of pet companies out there, as you know, as a pet shop owner, on the holistic side of things, that are sourcing meats and all the things that they put into their foods from good sources, from farms, from organic sources. These are the things you're not finding in conventional pet food, far from it, you know. And I'm sure we could talk for hours on conventional pet food that you find at Walgreens and all these other stores, even some natural pet stores, though I'm surprised sometimes what they carry, you know, because it's all natural. But then you read the ingredients, I'm like, oh my goodness, there's like natural and artificial flavors in here and all sorts of stuff. And there's all sorts of weird gray areas for the regulation and non-regulation of these foods, which is another topic I'm sure we could talk about. But going on this line of kind of the diversification, and I've heard you speak about this in your interview with Judy Morgan,
Yes.
on her YouTube channel, which was a great interview, by the way. And
Thank
you
you.
guys talked about diversification and the importance of that. And this goes along with, too, to kind of tie it into the herbal stuff that we're talking about cycling these things and knowing how important that is. And so let's talk about this with diet, though, because one of the things you brought up and that I know about is just think about eating the same thing your whole life and how stifling that is, how programming it is to your body, and your body's going to program in a certain way if you're always getting the same thing. And a lot of times that's what's happening with our pets. So let's go into diet. I'm a huge proponent of raw food, and it sounds like you are as well. And so I would love to talk about raw food and diet and just the importance of this in our pets' lives.
So I've been feeding raw for over, well, about, yeah, over just over 10 years, because Diego's first year I didn't know any better. And then I started cooking it because I was scared of raw. And then as I was going through my education, I started cooking it less and less. And then I remember the day my husband said the best thing you ever did was feed Diego raw. And that was like, when your husband admits it, then you know you're doing something right.
Yes. You noticed? Wow.
Yeah. So that was the light bulb moment for me. But yeah, you know, I want to, one of the things that I do want to express to your listeners and to you is I'm really like a no judgment zone, right? Like I can tell you how the feline body and the canine body is designed to eat, but with rising costs in the grocery store, like not everyone can afford that. And so I just want to meet the person where they're at financially, even maybe, you know, if they're concerned because their veterinarian has said, you know, they've scared them about raw, even though the reason why the AVMA recommends that you don't feed raw food is more because of the hazard that it might pose to humans, which is quickly abated by just practicing, you know, safe food handling practices. But so, you know, I am one of those store owners, just for full disclosure, that I do have kibble in my store. I have a high protein kibble. I have you know, it's lower carbohydrates. It's more aligned with what a dog is supposed to eat. But I don't want someone to ever come in thinking I can't feed raw. I don't want to feed fresh food. I don't want to feed freeze dried. And therefore you can't help me. And I'm now destined to be, you know, my dog's got or my cat's got to eat whatever. So I'm always trying to meet people where they are and tell them how they can improve. Now, specifically when we're talking about cats, let's just talk about this. So they're obligate carnivores, as you know, Michelle. You know, they have no nutritional need for carbohydrates whatsoever. And they actually are descendants of desert dwellers. What that means is that their bodies are designed to get all of the moisture that it needs from their prey. Now, here's the problem. The majority, you know, the commercial world, that when the commercial food came out, you know, 60 years ago or whatnot, found this really convenient way for us to feed our cats and dogs through this dry kibble that's been extruded at high heat that has removed almost all of the moisture and basically changed, from a chemical standpoint, all of the nutrient value of that food, to a point that when you look at the bottom of the back of that bag, you see like a paragraph of all the stuff they had to add back in, because that's all of the nutrients that was lost. So now we have to add in synthetic vitamins. So the worst thing you can do for a cat is feed dry food. Like, hands down, the worst thing. There's no wavering on this. Your cat will end up having kidney disease. It will. If all you do is feed it dry food. And, I hear a lot of people say, oh, my cat goes to the water bowl. That is not how it's supposed to be. Cats, if they're going to drink, it would be in excess of what they ate in their prey, but that is not supposed to be the normal. So feeding a cat, appropriately with high protein, from a variety of meats. Think about it just with us, right? That on the days we eat turkey for Thanksgiving, we're having that tryptophan high, right? On days that we're eating beef, we're getting higher iron. So there's different nutritional levels, or nutrient levels, I should say, in different foods. And so having that diversity and rotation is really important. Now, when it comes to cats, as any cat owner knows, they are as finicky as they can be. And though we love our dear feline friends, it can be a little frustrating to try to get them, because that you want to be switching through and giving them, different proteins, especially when you're feeding raw, and they may not be participating. They may only want to allow 1 or 2 to come into their diet, or maybe 3 if you're lucky. And so one of the things that I recommend you can do with cats specifically is add toppers that provide different nutritional value through like freeze-dried toppers or food or something to that effect. Now, when we're talking about dogs are going to be, they're also carnivores, but they're considered facultative carnivores. There have been a lot of studies done. Dogs, when left to their own devices, are going to eat high protein, high fat. When they're starving, they'll eat anything that's around them. And when we're giving ultra processed food, which it's not really the most nutritionally sound, okay? Their body is on a cellular level kind of starving for the nutrition that whole food is going to provide them. So, you're going to see they also have no nutritional need for carbohydrates, but they can definitely get benefits out of it, right? So I provide a lot. Well, I shouldn't say a lot. I provide a variety of carbohydrates to Lola. Like, she's always going to have cranberries in her diet because they're high in vitamin C. They're going to keep her urinary tract clear. They provide amazing antioxidants. She always gets, well, not always, but I rotate through dandelion greens, because that's going to support her in a myriad of ways with all of, and I'm going out to my backyard because I know we've lived here for 12 years. There's never been a chemical, thrown on my yard. So I know it's been cleared, whatever plants, the roots have kind of cleared the soil. So we're safe. Red cabbage or cilantro as a heavy metal detoxer. So you can play around. I make, I grow my own, broccoli sprouts, add in turnips, trying to think about all the different ways to provide, prebiotics, along with the probiotics. Probiotics are really easy, I think, to get into dogs, a little bit harder to get into cats. If they don't really like the taste of goat milk, then you have to be a little bit more sneaky about it. Like with Henry, I get a freeze-dried goat milk that I put a layer of food down, and then I like sprinkle it and then make like a little burger on top. And so like he doesn't know as he's getting in the bite that he's getting a little bit of the probiotic. But there's so much that you can do. And so to my point, I kind of lost track of my own thought. I apologize. But if you're feeding a kibble, and if that's all you can afford, there are things that we can do, right? Like we can add pet grade bone broth to the cat food to help provide that moisture at time of feeding. With dogs, we can do the same, but we can also add water to the food. Because if you think about it, the dry kibble has 10% moisture. And for all of the pet parents that say, but my dog, drinks a lot after he ate, well, that's kind of chasing the 8 ball, right? They need to be drinking that water at the time that they're consuming the food so that the body can break down that food and the stomach acids can assimilate the nutrients and put it into the small intestines. So there's so much that can be done. It's complex depending on where the pet parent is, right? So I don't mean to go on and on. Is it okay to keep going?
No, keep
Okay.
going. No, this is great. No,
Okay.
it's great.
So for kibble parents, I don't ever want them to feel like we're judging. It's just, no, this is where you're at. Now let's try to take steps to make minor improvements. With the idea being is that when you make the minor improvements, you actually start to see that your animal has a shinier coat, has a softer coat, has more energy. And then you start to realize, wait a second, I haven't been to the vet in like 6 months. What is this about? Right? When you were there every month. And now you're realizing I'm saving money. And so now you found some money that you can now upgrade the food. And then the cycle just continues. And so I have a lot of people that, feed fresh food. Luckily in the pet space, there's a lot of companies that are now providing commercial frozen, either lightly cooked or raw food that are great. I like to cycle through not only between proteins and have my customers and my clients do that, but also between brands, especially in the raw world, because what you have to think about is they all use like specific like recipes, right? So they'll have vegetables and fruits that's made it complete and balanced with that protein. And that's usually very similar across the varying proteins. So though you might be diversifying the protein intake, you're not diversifying the fruits and vegetables that they might be including. So going to a different brand in the raw space or in the lightly cooked provides that extra variety. And I say that with the asterisk of you rotate if that's what works for your animals. I have a lot of clients that, dogs that might be 14, 15, or older dogs that are 8 or 9 that have been dealing with, gastrointestinal problems for years and we found a food that works for them. Trying to start adding more variety is not going to be right for those animals. So it's really kind of looking at the animal in front of you and making a plan that fits their needs, and then improving it as you can. With always, I will say, every being, and I know we talked about this earlier, Michelle, but that to me is part of the food. It just needs to be there.
Yeah, Johnna, this is awesome. And you've brought up so many points that I feel like we can spring off of. But I love that you brought up, firstly, being in the space of non-judgment with this stuff, because that's one of the things that I learned just throughout my own journey with it, because we can get soapboxy when we find something that works. And you see that with all sorts of things in life. You can get on a soapbox and then it makes people feel alienated, and then it scares them, and then it shuts them down. And then they're kind of like, I'm not even going to listen to this because now I'm just being told what's good or whatever.
Or what I'm doing wrong.
Exactly. Exactly. And no one, we don't, as people, you don't respond very well to that stuff. It's better to have a healthier conversation. Like, so I'm noticing this, maybe you could try that, as opposed to, what you got to do. It's like that doesn't work very well. People tend to shut down. And so I really like that you started there, because there are kibbles on the market, as you know, that do provide a better option than others, so that's a really good place to start. And I love too that you brought up the rotation of brands and the rotation of flavors, because that's also something that I saw an improvement with Carl when I would do that. And then the more I rotated, the more open he was to have that come through, just like a person would be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so if you would just briefly, if you have suggestions for people on brands, do you have any brands that you really find work really well? And I know there's regional things too. Like there's local companies out here in the West Coast that I was like, oh, these are awesome. But I know you're on the East Coast, but are there any that you really just respect and appreciate that you carry that you would suggest for people to look into?
Yeah, I only carry what I would give my own pets.
Right on.
And so, I say I curate my store.
I love that. I wish I could come and visit it. That's so cool. I love going to pet stores.
It'd be great. So when you're looking at kibble, and this is going to be for both dogs and cats, I love the company Rawz. It's RAWZ. I think it's like Raw's Natural Pet Care, but I love it for two reasons. A, the food is the first 7 or 8 ingredients, depending on the flavor profile that you're giving. And I'm not talking about the limited ingredient. I'm talking about like the regular line. They all are coming from dehydrated human grade meats. So you're talking like chicken liver, turkey liver. There's no meals in the product. They, hallelujah, do not use canola oil. There is no canola oil in there. And they also don't use potatoes. And the protein content on a dry matter basis, and that's just for your listeners, when you take the moisture content out, is about 42% for both the dogs and the cats, which compare that to the normal kibble dry matter basis, you're running around 26%, which means when you look at, if you have a bag of dog food or cat food that says the protein content is 26% and if fat is 10%, and then you add moisture, ash, I mean, you're looking at almost 55 to 60% is coming from carbohydrates. Now, I just told you 5 minutes ago that cats as obligate carnivores have no nutritional need for carbohydrates, and yet most kibbles are giving them 55 to 60% carbohydrates. And then we wonder why our cats are, overweight, why diabetes is at an alarming rate, why they're going through kidney or renal failure. Same thing with dogs, just in a different capacity. And so Raw's kind of narrows that carbohydrate gap using really high quality protein. So that would be my go-to for kibble. For canned food for cats and dogs, I also want to stick with Raw's because they also don't use any gums. And so carrageenan, guar gum, all of that really is going to promote inflammation in the GI tract, which is something that we can avoid. And then as far as raw food, I love Savage Cat for cats. It's fantastic. I also like small batch. For dogs, my go-to are small batch and Bones and Company are going to be my two raw food for dogs. And then lightly cooked, I love Raised Right as a really great brand, which Dr. Karen to formulate that. And then Dr. Judy Morgan helped to formulate All Provide, which is another really good one. So there's a few brands depending on where you want to feed. And what I would tell you, your listeners, is to anyone, especially with cats, right? I mean, depending on the dog, most dogs transition pretty quickly, though, going from kibble to raw, if that's what you're interested in. Realize that there's going to be a little bit of a change, adding warm water, never put anything in the microwave because then you're killing everything that you can entice them to eat it, but it doesn't take much enticement. For cats, however, what's really required in changing the diet of cats is patience, because cats are going to be like, what are you doing? What are you putting in my bowl? I don't know what that is. And they're gonna kind of avoid it. And what you want to make certain, especially if you have an overweight cat, you can't let a cat not eat within a 24-hour window, because you could potentially, they could go into it's called hepatic lipidosis. So you really want to make certain that you introduce it in really small, gradual ways until they accept it. And then once they accept the change in food, the world is your oyster.
The other thing too, talking about the toppers, which is a really nice one. And that's something new that's been coming out on the market over the last few years or whatever. But it reminds me, because I was just recently back home visiting my mom and my stepdad, and they recently got a new cat, and she's about a year old. And my mom, I've tried really hard to guide her away from the kibble and this and that and stuff. And I've gotten her to at least be more conscious of the brands that she gets, because she's now giving some kibble, some wet. And I couldn't help myself but go to the pet store with my mom and get Misty set up with some toppers and things like that. And what I've found too with cats is that they love the organ meats and all these freeze dried treats that are out on the market. So I got her chicken hearts because that was something Carl really loved. And just seeing her light up when I gave it to her, and the difference, and then allowing my mom to see how important that was. And I was like, look at how much she just loves these chicken hearts versus the other treats you had. And my mom acknowledged it, and just like kind of, showing her give her a piece of this every day, and the taurine in there is so good and it can balance out what's not in this food. And so anyway, I really love your approach and how you're sharing this information with people and allowing them to see that there's options. And I think that's what is most important with even herbalism and being more holistic in life in general, is that there are so many options when it comes to taking care of ourselves. And we need to remind ourselves of that, the same is for our pets, and that instead of going into a place of fear or feeling like you only have one way out, or just like your experience with Henry, it was like, no, I'm not giving up on him. I'm going to try this, that, and the other thing. And then it works. It opens so many things up in us and in our pets. So I just want to thank you, for your demeanor and your knowledge and all that you're sharing and all you're doing for the pets out there. It's really fantastic.
And you really just brought up a really great point about treats. I can't tell you, and I laugh. I don't mean to. It's funny. There are a lot of people that are out there feeding raw food, and then I ask them what they're feeding for treats because they're trying to figure out why their animal isn't responding in a certain way, and they show me the treats, and they're like 30 ingredients deep. And they have soy and corn, or they have wheat flour, and they have all of these things that are not aligned to what else is being fed. So, for those, regardless of where you are on your pet's health journey, don't forget to look at the treats, right? I am a big advocate for single ingredient treats or limited ingredient treats if it's like a Vital Essentials, right? Where it has like beef heart, beef lung, kidney. Like if we're talking about multiple organs, right? Then it would be a limited ingredient treat. But yeah, feeding them what their body was designed to eat. And then also remembering that treats are only supposed to make up 10% of their daily caloric intake. A lot of people overtreat and then they're like, oh, I'll just reduce the amount of food. No, that's not the way to do that. That's like going out and eating a bunch of Hostess cupcakes and say, I'll eat less fruits and vegetables. Look how that's worked for the human race. It's not really working. So, if we want to do different by our pets, we have to kind of think of it in totality.
Yeah, I love that. It's so important. And I'm so grateful to have talked to you today. And I want to also say before we wrap up here, I really wanted to talk to you about oral care, because that is one of the things. And I know it's too big of a egg to fry right now towards the end of the conversation, but I'd love to have you back on, and we could maybe have just a full episode on that, because that's one of the things that I wished I would have known more about and been more attentive to with Carl, because it was just one of the things that I tried towards like middle to end of his life to really start to incorporate stuff. But I imagine, just like with anything, start while they're young and get them used to having their teeth brushed and doing these things with them. So I would love to pick your brain on that subject in general at some other point. But before I let you go, I would love for you to allow people to let them know where they can find you. I'll also have all the links to all of your socials and your website and the website for your store below. But please let everybody know where they can find you, and if you have any final thoughts for the listeners.
So you can find me on Instagram. I just started my page a few months ago. It's at Johnna Devereaux, and you're not going to be able to spell that. So you'll have to look at Michelle's website so that you can spell that. And really, some parting words is just going to be, the fact that you're here and you're listening to this and that you listen to the entirety of this episode says that you love your pets. And so any step that you can take, no matter how small, is going to make a really big difference. And it sounds corny, but it's like that one ripple that just keeps rippling out, and your pets will benefit. And then you as well will benefit, because that furry love in your life, that they steal those parts of our heart that really nothing else in the universe does, will be with you longer, or as long as possible. So don't give up. And I will say, question and be their advocate. When you go to the veterinarian and they say there's nothing they can do, or you must do this, or you must give them, this chemical as like a preventative, and I won't go down this road because we could go on for another hour, but just ask, is there something else that I can do? Is there something more natural I can do? And that's going to be how you support the overall health and wellness of your pets, and just, the best to all of you.
And thank you so much again for being here with us. And I wish you all the best. And we'll talk to you again real soon.
Thank you.
All righty, everyone. Thanks for being here. As always, Janna is such a wealth of information when it comes to holistic pet care. So if you liked what you heard today, check her out on social media. And also you can find all of her links to all of her stuff down below in the description. As always, for all things Healing Home, head to michelleshealinghome.com. Thank you to all the patrons out there: Chance and Jenny G, Sarah G, Liam, Miri and Hank, Erica, Moonlander, Mary, Louie, Logan, Mickey, Doreen, Debbie, Natasha, Mary Beth, Nausicaa, Stephanie, Charlai, Peter, Elise and James, Rachel and Vanessa. Thank you guys so very much. Patreon.com/thehealinghome if you want to join us over there on Patreon. A handbook for herbal and natural cat care is available. So appropriate with this conversation from today. But this is such a lovely offering, a great way for anyone who wants to start introducing herbal and natural remedies into their cats' lives. You can go to my website and download this ebook for yourself. I'm super proud of this work, and I'm really excited to just continue working on it and seeing where it goes from there. The Full Moon Offering newsletter, you can sign up for that over on michelleshealinghome.com. Just head to the newsletter tab where you can sign up, and you can also check out my archive issues from the beginning of my release up until the current offering that is going on. Speaking of offerings, we are still on offering number 43, which is my tincture, seeds, and salves offering. This was a really nice one because I love sharing all of these remedies, but specifically the seeds have been really fun to send out and to give away as well, because it's always nice to watch people start to grow some plants that they use as medicine on their own so that they can create their own medicine. So I've got tobacco seeds, I have blue vervain seeds, my fresh Ellie campaign root and honey tincture, as well as my skin and wound salvation balm. Up here on the screen is my current menu of what you can find. All the prices are listed here as well. And I also want to say that if you want to learn how to make the skin and wound salvation balm for yourself, I released a tutorial on how to make it last week. So you can find that here on YouTube as well if you are wanting to see my process and maybe learn a few tricks of the trade and try and have a go at it on your own. Next Full Moon Offering newsletter comes out on the 23rd, which is next week, Tuesday. So look out for that and make sure you sign up for the newsletter if you haven't already. And I will also be having a lip balm tutorial coming out on the 23rd. So that will be at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm going to take you through the process of how I like to make lip balm, and it's a really fun one. Lip balm is one of those things where it's a pretty easy thing to do, but there are a few things to consider once you start doing it. So come and check that out on the 23rd here on the Healing Home. And Mario is actually going to be on Vibrant this Wednesday. He's going to be doing a talk about kingdoms, kings, and crosses. He is very excited about this, so go check out the Interverse podcast with Chance Garton, Slick Dissident. Gabe will be there, and Mario will be there. They're going to talk all about kings, kingdoms, and kings. So that'll be a really nice one. I mean, I should say kingdoms, kings, and crosses, and how that all relates together. I really love this image and this thumbnail that he created for it as well. It looks beautiful. Patreon.com/symbolic studies. If you want to go support Mario in a different way, you can do that over there on Patreon. And for all things symbolic studies, symbolicstudies.com as always. And with all of that said, everybody, that'll do it for this week. Thank you so very much for hanging out with me. And Janna, this was a wonderful conversation. And I hope you guys take care out there and are enjoying the springtime. Until next time, cheers.